Well, hello, everybody. Tara Baklund here with the Matthew Wood Institute of Herbalism with another Becoming an Herbalist episode. And today I have with me Ashley Elenbaas, who's, compared especially to all the other herbalists I've had on, is practically in my backyard. And so, and I'm looking forward to getting to know you more in person as well. So this will be quite a treat. So thank you for joining me today.
Oh, thank you, Tara, for having me. And I am such a fan of Matthew Wood and the school that you have all put together. So I'm just delighted to be here and to share what might be helpful to people about becoming an herbalist and what it means and yeah, things not to do as well as things that to try.
Cool. Well, like you were talking about briefly before this, everybody's journey is so unique, and that's the hope, is that through these stories you'll be inspired or maybe find that next little step along the way. And certainly, being an herbalist that's helping your family and your community is already a wonderful, wonderful thing. This is not to imply that by being a clinical herbalist, going beyond serving your family and friends, is even a greater thing. I think they really, all the roles have their purpose.
Absolutely.
And however, those people who do want to make it their profession, I know myself, having grown up in a family where you work a day-to-day job and so forth, becoming an entrepreneur, you're a business owner, and because most herbalists do run their own businesses, it can be daunting. And so the hope is to inspire and even help see those next steps along your path through these stories. So Ashley also runs her own podcast. So I'm going to say for the both of us, and it's a lovely podcast. Definitely check it out. There's bite-sized pieces. I think a lot of yours are in the 20-minute range, and lovely Instagram channel as well. So definitely like, subscribe, and share with your friends, please, as well. That's at the Matthew Wood Institute of Herbalism. And name your podcast?
Ours is Sky House Herbs.
Lovely. And that's the name of your website as well.
It is, yeah. Yeah, all of my handles is Sky House. They're all Sky House Herbs.
That's good. And business 101.
Streamline. Yeah.
So let's start from the beginning. What led you into herbalism?
I think it's interesting because we were saying that not everyone has the same path, but I was definitely in the camp of kids who like to be outside and get muddy and mix potions. And, I grew up in the suburbs of Maryland. I had a 1/4 acre suburban lot. It was nothing fancy. I didn't have like fields to roam in, but that little backyard felt like a whole world to me. And so I think my love of plants and my love of nature was really inspired from the trees that grew in that yard. And we had some woods that bordered between neighborhoods that we would crawl through and explore. And so when I was thinking about what I was going to study in college, I didn't know what my options were. So I went into environmental science. That's what I chose because I knew I wanted to do something with plants and the environment. And as someone who was a vegetarian at that age, because of health reasons, actually, and was really into kind of a more natural granola, hippie scene in high school. I knew that I wanted to go into something that was going to be helpful for the earth and some sort of humanitarian type of job. And so environmental science seemed like a good fit for me because I did like biology and chemistry. So I studied environmental science at University of North Carolina, Asheville in the Appalachian Mountains for 2 years. And that's where I also met a naturopath who cured me from my depression in like one dose of pulsatilla. That was a whole thing. And then I met Corinna Wood from Red Moon Herbs and did some herb walks with her. So it was I was also an activist in Earth First. So we were like spiking trees and like down with the pipelines and so I was very active in the environment. But then I started realizing as I was studying more and more about the environmental degradation that I was like, I don't want to be cleaning up wastelands. I want to be ahead of the game. Like, how do we get people to protect the environment on their own without me just taking soil samples and then redoing wetlands? So I took a semester off of school, and me and 3 friends of mine, we bought a van and we traveled around the United States. So we took a semester off and we're just soul searching. We were like, all of us were like, there's something more that we want to do with our lives, but we don't know what it is. So I visited a bunch of naturopathic schools, acupuncture schools. We camped in national parks around the US. And, I was starting to feel more and more that I wanted to work with people and educating people about plants, but I didn't know, like, what do you do with that? So then I moved back to Maryland and finished my undergrad degree in integrative health studies, thinking I was going to go to naturopathic school, and did an internship at it was then Thai Sophia, but it's now Maryland Institute of Integrative Health, MUIH. Maryland University of Integrative Health. That's it. So I did an internship there and learned a lot about acupuncture and about herbal medicine from James Snow, and interviewed some of the herbal faculty there when I was still doing my undergrad. And I was like, I think I want to be an herbalist. I think that's it. So then when I graduated, I went, I just went right into school as, in my undergrad, or it was a master's of science in clinical herbal medicine. But the interesting thing about my journey is that I started practicing yoga. My first yoga class was around age 13, actually here in Minneapolis. I was living in Maryland and I came back to visit my aunt one summer, and she took me to uptown Minneapolis and took me to a yoga studio. And that like blew my mind open. And so I started studying yoga once I got to Asheville when I was 18, and like really full on into yoga. And so what ended up happening was I started my work as a yoga teacher and working with the body, but integrating into like what I was learning about energetics from yoga and from my herbal studies. So when I got to my herbal practice, I actually had I was a yoga studio manager. And so I had like all of these people that were into the same stuff. So I feel like for my path, what was really helpful getting me off the ground was that I had another line of work as a yoga teacher and studio manager, and like that whole community that were like open to seeing me as an herbalist. So I ended up filling my client hours with people from the yoga world. And then when I opened up my own practice, it was like already kind of going. So that was really helpful. And that would be one piece of advice is like, like pull from what you already have, because that was something that I had already established. So yeah. So I don't know, that's kind of like, that was how my herbal career began.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a wonderful start, not only to this talk, but what I hear in a lot of stories too, is there's a certain amount of kind of, let's say, luck or kismet in a lot of ways, where you're just kind of following your heart. And I guess I'm putting the pieces of the puzzle together. Sometimes I just got to call it. I mean, there's so many of these stories. It's like, I just felt I need to do this. Like you mentioned, take the semester off and really take that time.
Yeah.
Are there any other times where you really felt like things were just coming together? You mentioned also being involved in yoga and this being a studio manager and how that just kind of came together. There any other things that come to mind?
I mean, I feel like when the student is ready, the teacher appears in many ways. And when I was doing my undergraduate work at UMBC in Baltimore, I took a class called like integrative health, and the teacher was Bob Duggan, who was the founder of Thai Sophia. And as soon as I met him and I heard him speaking, the way he was talking about the world and consciousness, it was like, finally, like he gets what I've been, because I had been like, reading Terence McKenna. Like at the age of 16, I was reading like the Tibetan Book of the Dead and like just really scouring the library for Buddhist texts and just, like religious and spiritual philosophy, and just trying to make sense of the world. Because for me, the white picket fence, like, I don't know, just the consumerist way of living just never made, and didn't make sense. I was like, there's got to be more, guys. Why is anybody talking about the subtle stuff that's like magic all around us. So when I met Bob Duggan, it was like I was ready. He was the teacher. And I just was like, whatever he does or wherever he is, I'm going to follow. And I listened to that. So that's when I got the apprenticeship for, I apprenticed with him, and was basically his like teacher assistant as he taught that course at the university. And then I got a job as just a receptionist at the acupuncture school, just taking phone calls and, putting people in rooms and cleaning tables and just and sanitizing. It was not fancy, but I just wanted to be in the environment. I was like, these are the people I want to be around. And I was in my early 20s, and I feel like that was so important, was just to like take that stance of like, I'm a beginner. I'll do whatever you like. Tell me what you need help with. I just want to be around this. And because of that, I think I had so many opportunities because there were all these elders in my life who saw that I didn't mind scrubbing floors and, like looking for lost needles that popped out of someone's ear for 2 hours. Like I didn't mind, I was like, I'm here to learn. And that got me another job at the school. And, it just connected me with people. And I think that was a huge part of my journey, was just like not taking anything for granted and really staying, like really valuing the importance of your relationships with people. And I still feel that way. Like I still feel like that's one of the most important things that I've learned in my life, is the importance of community and relationships.
That's a great nugget. We definitely see that, while we're in online school, you can definitely tell even online when people have that mentality. They're just like, I love being here, and they're just chiming in the community. And it's interesting because they naturally give more, because they're participating in conversation, and there's more, but there's also more that comes out of that.
Hmm.
They get more in return, and there's more of that back and forth, even with other students, not just with the teachers. And that leads into one of my questions. Since you did go into more of a formal study for herbalism, and you run your own school and have classes online and in person as well, so what would you say is the big difference, pluses or minuses, of having studied in person and in more of a formal setting? What might a person get there as opposed to, even a small setting, studying with a local herbalist, or even online?
Yeah. And a lot of the students that come to my school have done all sorts of different programs. So, and I've done a lot of online trainings with like Rosemary Gladstar's school. And yeah, I mean, there's definitely pros and cons to those different types. For me, the advantage is I was like 23. I didn't have a family. I didn't have a mortgage. I took out a student loan. That was, that's a downside, because it's making money as an herbalist it's a whole thing. But I took that leap of faith, and I had the spaciousness in my life at that time to commit to a 3-year full-time program. I mean, it was, I think it was like 3 days a week, 8:30 to 4. It was like, and then when you got to clinic, it was 5 days a week. So it was very intensive. And I think, the benefit of that for me is I'm a kinesthetic learner. Like I need to be doing things. Like that's why yoga made so much sense for my body, is I need to be doing the thing to learn it. Like I either need to hear a story about it and it needs to hit me like personally, or I need to be actively physically engaged in the study. So for me, being in a classroom with a whiteboard and seeing the plants, and then working with clients one-on-one, and taking their pulses, looking at their tongues, looking at their eyes, and seeing things on a very physical level for my learning style was critical. Like I don't think I would have gotten the same kind of education had I done it another way. However, once I had that foundation, then I could find, then I could go online, because I already kind of knew in my body what I was looking for, and what things made sense. But definitely, I think the cost is one of the biggest things people need to really consider, because I have a lot of classmates who went through that program who are still paying off their student loans. It's hefty. So you really want to take that seriously and think about, how are you going to pay those off because they accrue interest. It's like the whole student loan system is just is bonkers. Um, but my husband and I were thankfully about 3 years ago, we were able to pay off all of our student loans because our business started doing well enough. And that was the first thing we did. The first thing we did was like, we're paying off these student loans. We just want them off of our shoulders so that there's some like freedom. And then we started, then we bought a house, and then we started, investing in other things. But I think that's something to really be conscious of, is like, if you want to pay off those loans, you're going to have to work your butt off. Like it's a it's a serious commitment. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm sure we'll hear more about that as the election comes even closer. That's been a topic. But it's a serious one, because we all need to make a living of some sorts. And there is to some people, becoming their own boss, having their own business is a dream. And, if you're not strapped down by those expenses, boy, that can make that dream come to fruition sooner.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So did you guys were studio owners for a while, weren't you? Yoga studio owners?
Yeah. So in the DC area, my husband was a yoga teacher, and I had been teaching yoga for about 15 years at that point. So we opened up a yoga studio in downtown Silver Spring. And out of the yoga studio, I had a working apothecary, and then my husband taught his astrology through his astrology work. So we kind of had everything. That was the name Sky House, because it was like the sky, and then the house on earth together. And so like one place to like learn about what's above and below. And it was beautiful. And I loved it. It was hard because, I had like 15 staff to take care of, to like payroll to manage, marketing. I mean, I did all of it. My husband mostly focused on he saw clients. Like his major part of his practice was teaching and then doing readings. And we did that for like 11 years. We operated our yoga studio, and there was a lot that I learned from that. But, one of the things that I think I really took away from that experience, and one of the reasons why we closed in 2019, it was just too much. I realized, and once I became a mother, I was like, I really want to be a mom, and I really want to focus on herbs. As much as I love yoga, and yoga is always going to be close to me, I was like, this chapter of my life, I really want to focus on the plants and my kids. And like, that's all I have the bandwidth for. And it was a really hard choice because there was such a strong community we had with that studio. But I think we all hit those places in our lives. We all, the planet Saturn in astrology, like we'll just come in, and you can see it coming. You're like, I'm going to have to make some hard choices and let things die. And then sure enough, it comes in, and there's a crossroads. And, but I think, like you said, like when you stay with your heart and you're like, well, what feels, not like, what do I think I should do, but like what feels like the right move, like what's going to actually bring greater joy to me. And if I'm in a good place, then I can serve better. Like that's where I decided to make that choice from. And, yeah. And so then I moved everything I did online until we moved here. And now I do some classes in person.
Well, that was great foresight. I'm sure with the astrology too, seeing we didn't know all of what was going to happen in 2020, but definitely as astrologers were like, something big is going to happen. And what I found personally too with Saturn as well is that if you don't make that choice, something's going to happen. Like it's better to tune in. I mean, I think that's kind of what's challenging about astrology is it's very heady. You can easily get so much in your head that you lose that connection with your heart and intuition. I'll just speak for myself personally. And you can see like, okay, Saturn's heading in that direction. You think what's going to happen, but you really have to tune in. I mean, I'm sure you guys had many talks and heart to hearts.
Yeah, that's such a great point, though. It is a very heady science, and so, yeah, and it's always, even though my husband's been doing this work for like 20 years, he's like, it always surprises me. He's like, what it ends up being.
Yeah.
it might sometimes he gets it like spot on, but a lot of times it's the same theme in a slightly different package. But yeah, if you know what the themes are that you're looking for, that you're going to want to figure out, like you said, like if you don't make the choice, it will be made for you. And that's always harder, I think, to have
Mhm.
to deal with.
Yeah, I think so too. Like if the more you resist it, some things are going to happen regardless, you know.
Yeah.
So that's an amazing shift. And so before we started here, you mentioned that you would have some tips like to what to do and what not to do. And what comes to mind? What did you have in mind when you mentioned that?
Yeah, I think one of my biggest takeaways from, my little life journey so far has been, um, yeah, like making the choices when they're in front of you rather than putting them off. I think that's a huge one. And also, tending the trunk of the tree of like who you are. I think that's something that I learned a lot later than I think a lot of other people, it seems, which was, like, taking care of yourself and really taking care of yourself. And that's physical, mental, emotional, spiritual. And keeping an eye on that, the health of that, so that you aren't focused on the fruits and the branches and the flowers and all the peripheral things. Um, because if you put so much energy in the peripheral things and you're not tending the core will crack. It will get dried out. It will not be able to sustain all that fruit. And I feel like that's kind of what, you know, it, I trust that everything happened for a reason, but if I could go back, we did a studio expansion. I was like, oh, it's this great new space. It's bigger, it's better. We can have aerial yoga. And I took this huge leap of faith and financial leap to move into this bigger space. And in retrospect, the smallness and the sweetness of that studio before was fine. And I think if I had just been like, it's okay to be small. It's okay to just do what you love with lower stress, lower overhead, and keeping myself more like just in a more grounded place. Then if I hadn't done that big expansion, I think it was that expansion that just kind of sunk the ship in some ways, because it was too big, too fast, and it took too much of me, and I couldn't regenerate fast enough. And so, I was like, and of course, that was like my husband looked at the chart and was like, we shouldn't do this. It's Jupiter on your midheaven. Like, it's going to, like, what goes up will come down. I was like, no, definitely not. I got this. Like, I'm ready. And I was ready in that moment, but I wasn't ready to sustain it. And I think that's something that in herbal practice, I see a lot with students, is like this gung ho attitude in the beginning, but it's actually not the creation that's the hardest. It's the maintenance.
Mhm.
That is I think in my experience, way harder. So to like have like a 5-year vision, and it doesn't have to be an outline, but just a sense of like, in 5 years, how are you going to maintain what you're doing?
Mhm.
Not like, how are you going to keep growing it, but how are you just going to keep it running? Because I don't think, I didn't realize as a business owner how much energy it takes to maintain and how much help you need. If you want to grow, you're going to need helpers. And so my husband and I, my husband has like 20 employees now for his business. And I have one, which is fine because I'm just, I'm just an online small school, but it's like, you can't, if you want to build things, it's okay to ask for help. It's okay to, it's important to know where your blind spots are, right? Like what you're not good at. Like, we've got an accountant, because I was doing accounting for a while, and I was like, this is killing me. I hate this.
Mhm.
But if I can see a report and know where I'm at, then that's helpful. But I don't want to enter all the data into QuickBooks. So we've, like, over the years, hiring things out has been something that I would recommend people do if it's not something that they enjoy, because your working hours are valuable. And so, like, you should put a price tag like on the hours you're working, and then the things you can outsource, like, and then that serves other people too. It's like people who want to help and serve and have certain skill sets. You get to like meet all these cool people that are also into plants or also into astrology, who can do the things you just can't. So I think those are some to-dos and not to-dos.
It's interesting you mentioned accounting because, I think of the person who's maybe, I think your previous career, your previous passions kind of feed into how you can apply herbalism, make herbalism a career. Because a lot of their students, granted, are people who have lived some life, right? It's
Mhm.
like, I think we're both talking about in our own ways. You don't really necessarily go through high school. Most of us don't know what an herbalist is and that pathway, right?
Mhm.
And so a lot of people come by it a little bit later in life. And so where was I going with that? I was trying to explain so much where I was coming from that I forgot where I was going.
It's okay.
Oh, that's where I was going. So I've often used the example that, you may just love herbs and you're an accountant. And you might end up combining the two where you're an accountant for herbalists, where,
Yes.
we need people who know the industry, love, having those discussions, and they understand when you're like, yeah, I bought, or I bought this stuff to make, my tinctures, and just so many nuances, right? That they get it, instead of someone who's normally an accountant for, let's say, a manufacturing company that just has a very different mindset. There is a niche. There is something for everybody.
I love that. That's so true. Yeah, because if you're you can be a hobby herbalist and something else. Like, like I always tell my girls, like two things can be true.
Mm.
Like two things can be true. You don't have to always, you know, choose like, you don't always have to juxtapose things that look different. They can actually both exist together. And yeah, there's definitely a huge need for people that do accounting, who do inventory and stocking. There's a huge need for people who do really good, like human resources work, who are like really good with people and can like manage emails and incoming inquiries and things like that. And then marketing, like marketing's a whole world. And some people are, yeah, like if you have a background in marketing and you love herbs, like reach out to any any herb school or company. And that's going to be a skill set that and I have a lot of students who trade too. So they'll like take my program, and in trade, they'll do social media work, or they'll, yeah, there'll be other things, like they would come in and help me stock the apothecary as a trade. And then that helps both of us, and we both learn from each other in that way too. So I think that's a really nice way of building relationships, is by, yeah, putting forward the things that you did in your past life, if you will.
Yeah. Well, your photos are beautiful too in your website, and I could see that being someone's joint passion, right? Maybe they're a photographer or a designer of some sort, and I mean, definitely our team members. That's how we found them. They were students of the institute, and we put out the call, "Hey, we're looking for team members," and they're like, "Yeah, that sounds great. I would love to do what I love to do and what I love to do, and combine them." And it works great for everybody.
Absolutely.
So I have a question that I'm sure other women are wondering also. So how do you take care of that trunk when you're a mom, a wife, a business owner, and sure there's plenty of other spaces to fill in there. How do you personally manage that?
Yeah, well, so it's kind of interesting. I wish I could say, oh, well, it was this insight or this really simple thing, but it was actually a 3-year process. So when we closed down our yoga studio in 2019, I finished up, I taught online for 1 more year, and then I took a 3-year teaching sabbatical where I was just creating content on my YouTube like once a week and not seeing clients and not teaching. And in those 3 years, the first year, I learned how to slow down, and like I learned that my nervous system was very uncomfortable being still. I was like, okay, I need to look into this. Hence therapy and like, just a lot of like inward looking. So it took me a year to like, I think, figure out my nervous system where I wanted it to be. Because I was like, like I know what I've done and I know where that comes from, but I don't want to continue on in that, from that mind frame. And then the second year was starting to build back my reserves. So I started weight training pretty seriously, really taking like updating my diet and just really looking at nutrition. And then the third year was building friends, because I had moved to Minnesota in 2020 in the middle of the pandemic, which is where I was born. And I only lived here till I was 5. So I have family, but no friends. So in year 3, I was like, I need friends. I need people. Like I'm a social person. I think most of us are on some level, right? So um, year 3, I started just reaching out and started hosting small women's garden gatherings in my backyard and getting to know local people that were into plants. And yeah, I think now 3 years later, I'm teaching again, and I haven't opened my client practice. I think I'm going to wait till the kids are in school, you know, full time. Um, but it's been a very slow process, and I think that the biggest thing was just recognizing that my nervous system was in a sympathetic state, and that I didn't know how to get out of it, and I needed help. I needed tools. And then once I actually recognized that there was another possibility, then I feel like I was able to start with weight training, nutrition, and then starting to look into my, outer resources in the community for that support. And now I feel like I'm like a different person. Like I look back at some of my videos and classes that I taught in 2018, and I'm like, I was so uptight. I took it all so seriously, and it had to be perfect. And if there were interruptions, I got so irritated, and I'd get sick all the time because I was always just running myself ragged, trying to I was just such a perfectionist and hard on myself. And now it's like, oh, I mean, I think it's age too, but and being a mom wears you down like water over a rock over time. You just get soft. You just can't help it. So, and I mean, life does that too. There's lots of ways of getting soft. My girls have definitely done that for me. And so I think that's been the process. If I were to kind of track it out in that way.
Mm-hmm. I'm sure you've had this talk with other women. What are some suggestions you've given to them? Because everybody's situation is very unique, right?
Yeah. What suggestions do I give to other moms?
Yeah, probably moms in particular. And I think that would apply even if you just have a busy life.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think one thing that I like prioritizing my workouts. Like I actually put my workouts on my schedule so that I don't miss them. It's like an appointment with myself. So I go to the gym and I lift weights for an hour and I do 40 minutes of cardio. And that's that's my time to put money in the bank, in my inner bank. Also with my marriage, like my husband and I we were on very opposite sleep schedules because of the kids, and we synced up our sleep schedules a year ago, like when we were dating. And it's been revolutionary. I mean, we wake up in the morning before the kids get up and we'll have a little coffee on the porch and read and do our Wordle. And it's just like heaven. It's like, oh gosh, it's like this little half an hour pocket is it just sets the tone for the day. And then we have our pocket in the evening, which is like our sacred time. So I think for parents, just setting aside, having routine times for your own, regenerating your own energy, physically on your own. And then also with your partner, or if you have a friend or family member, just creating those spaces of really being in a self-regulated, calm state. And for me, the bookends really work, the beginning and the end of the day. And then I think too, with kids, it's hard. I mean, to be honest, I mess up every day, and I'm like, damn, Ashley, you sound like your mother, or but I think every day I wake up and I'm like, what kind of mom do I want to be today? Am I going to be fun mom, or when I'm not nice, my youngest daughter calls me Mr. Mom. When my eyebrows get furrowed, you're like, is it Mr. Mom today? I'm like, no, Mr. Mom. I'm good. I'm fine. Let me just, get hydrated, get my breakfast. But yeah, I think just giving yourself that grace too, being you're going to have moments where you don't show up the best that you want, the way that you wanted to. And, you can just start over. And I think, to me, in our family, it's apologizing. I think that's a big thing we do every day. You'll hear in our house, met several times being like, you know what? My tone wasn't very nice with you. I'm sorry. That wasn't cool. And then they'll be like, oh, it's okay, mom. And I'm like, okay, let's move on.
Mhm.
But then like the space is cleared. And I think just doing those resets and apologizing or just like checking in, like, are you okay? Is everything okay? Um, that just keeps things from building, which can make everything harder, I think.
Totally. That's so true. How old are your girls now?
My youngest is 5. She's going to be turning 6 next month. And then my oldest is 8. So I have a 5 and an 8-year-old.
So still really, well, I guess any age is busy and active. There's just different kinds.
Yeah. Yeah. This is active. It's not like diaper changing. It's not like, what are you going to put in your mouth and die from busy, but it's like they're very social and they're just very, yeah, very active, and they have friends now, and they have soccer and karate and just these things I didn't even anticipate, as like an herbal, like my idea of like, I'm going to be living out in the mountains, and I'm going to be a witch in the mountains and have just lots of goats. And, my life is very different than that. I live in the suburbs. And I've got kids that do karate and gymnastics. I'm still an herbalist. I think like, I'm coming to peace with the idea that like I can have a fantasy of what the herbalist I like there can be a fantasy of what being an herbalist looks like, and then there can be a reality, and like both can be true. And like when I'm in my garden, I am the hedge witch in my overalls, and I am like in with the plants, and I'm singing to them, and like that reality is real. And then I put on my jeans and I drive them to soccer, and then I talk to all the moms. And I do that too. And I'm like, I can be so many things. And I think I used to in my 20s think it had to be this black or white world where I either give up society or I give up my dreams of being a plant person. So that's been kind of fun. That's been like a fun discovery of.
I think that's an important point too, and it's part of the reason behind doing this becoming an herbalist series is there are, although or an herbalist is an archetype, there are archetypes within archetypes. And so you mentioned being the hedge witch, or the mom talking to other moms probably about kids and taking care of kids and so forth. And so they're helping people to see, aspiring herbalists to see those subcategories, those other ways that they might be an herbalist. Like for me, I was struggling for years. I was totally into health and wellness, but didn't really see my way, and it didn't feel right to be like a consulting herbalist or some kind of consultant. And it took a while. I think like many people have shared in their stories, you just follow the breadcrumbs, and eventually it reveals itself. Like apparently mine, having a fair amount of Capricorn in my chart, was more business oriented, and that doesn't fit like the visual paradigms of being an herbalist, but they do go together. You need people who come at it from different perspectives and
Yeah.
experiences.
Totally. Yeah, and I feel like, one thing that unites all of the archetypes together is this idea that Jesse Wolf Hardin talks about a lot, which is like the edge dwellers, the people
Mm.
who live on the fringe. And I feel like, all of the different archetypes, we line them all up, but they all are kind of balanced between two worlds. And, it could be like, yeah, the business world, there's like all of the different ways it can manifest, but there's something about, I think, the person who aspires and feels the connection with the plants, where they couldn't live in just one world. It's like the herbalist is a bridge in so many ways between the plant world and the human world. And so what I've really come to um, embrace is that there's a certain type of person that likes the kind of herbalism I do.
Mhm.
And that I can only reach that person if I'm 100% myself. If I try to be too much of this or too much of that, then it's not actually me, and then I reach no one.
Mhm.
Or it gets smaller. But I think, for people who are listening, thinking about what are the different worlds you live in and occupy, and like what kind of a bridge are you? Like for me, I am a plant spirit medicine, which is a lot of the work that Matthew Wood does, and doctrine of signatures, and really understanding the essence of plants and then translating that into their uses and helping people see plants as, I call them people, like seeing plants as living beings, not just objects. Like that's, and I really like meeting women, like middle-aged women who are like into nature, but they don't really know anything about plants, or maybe they're like just dabbling in spirituality, but they're like a little bit not sure. Because of my background in science, like I can talk the science. So let me talk you from the science over the bridge into the magical. But I don't have to let go of the science or the magic. It's like that's what I'm doing in as an edge dweller. And I feel like, for you as a business person, like had you not created the Matthew Wood Institute, so much of Matt's work would not be in existence in the way it's so organized and easy to find. And like there's subscriptions that are good for all different people of different, it's like your Capricorn saw the structure, and the structure was the bridge that's bringing all of these people who want to learn his work over into that world, and creating that access. And so I think like the more people that are bringing people over these bridges, it's like
Mhm.
that's like what I think herbalists are good at and should try to do. And like, Mason Hutchinson from Herb Rally, he's another great example of a bridge maker. He's an excellent interviewer, and his wife is a filmer. And so they travel around the country meeting herbalists, interviewing them, and create these connections, and through Herb Rally and through their online school as well. And it's just so neat. It's like, I love the creativity and seeing these worlds come together in all these different ways.
Excellent points. Yeah, I love it. It's on a similar note too. It, I think it's important to mention, because a lot of us, when we're starting out, there can be this sense of there's not enough space. There's not enough space for me. Why should I get into that? There's already 10 herbalists in my city, and they're already amazing. Why should I start up?
Mm.
And I and I'm saying that because I struggled with that at times as well. And even with the online opportunities, there's so much out there. But the reality is, there's, like you had mentioned, when you're genuine yourself, the people who are looking for that special flavor of herbalism, they gravitate towards that person. And like Matt always says, to be a good herbalist, you need to study with multiple people. And so if you're considering becoming a professional herbalist, we need you. We need your special background and your insights, and the experience you will gain over time as well. Have you seen that in your life?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. We need all hands on deck. Like I think at this time in history, we need more people that will speak up for the green, that will speak up for the earth and the plants and the medicines. And we need people that, yeah, can be translators. I mean, that's kind of what this work is in some ways. And, the more languages a person can speak, the better. So yeah, I think studying with multiple herbalists, learning their unique language set, and then studying in different fields broadens your language set so that you can really be like multilingual. And, yeah, so I do agree. I think there's always room. I've had hundreds of students go through my programs as Matthew has, and everyone comes out different, and has a different story to tell, and has a different first experience with a plant that can't be replicated. And you can't replace. There's no replaceable herbalists out there. So I think people should go for it and be realistic. Like don't quit your day job and do something that you don't think you can sustain. But like I think you said, Tara, like follow the breadcrumbs. I think everyone can take those small steps and build into a career in herbalism.
You mentioned your yoga studio that you guys started up. You had multiple businesses within. You had your apothecary there. Your husband was doing more or less, whether it was it on location he was doing his astrology readings, or maybe by phone. I
He
don't
was
know.
doing both. Yeah, he did some in person and then some online.
So Matt has often talked about his early days at Present Moment, Herbs and Books, and that's a shop in Minneapolis that still exists. But he said the largely what has kept it going over the years is that it wasn't just herbs. It is literally herbs and books. It's a really neat store. And in the few talks that we've had about business as online in classes and so forth, he has mentioned that if it's a physical location, he said the most successful herb shops, quote, herb shops, combined it with something else.
Mm.
And so with your experience, having kind of a multi-stop shop and just starting up business in general, what are some tips you would give to someone who is starting up, whether it's even out of their home or maybe it is a shop? Has anything come to mind?
Yeah, I mean, that makes a lot of sense to combine multiple things into one, like Present Moment. Or I'm thinking of Jewel Weed, which is an herb shop here in Wayzata, which also sells crystals and tarot. Like they've got a lot of things besides just herbs. Um, yeah, because you're going to attract different people. Different people are going to come in for the books, and different people are going to come in for the herbs. And yeah, I mean, that's I think where the business strategy comes in too, and just knowing like what items bring people in, and I didn't start a yoga studio because yoga was trendy. I started it because I loved yoga. And for me, where we lived, there were no donation based studios. So that was like a gap in the industry. It was like there were a lot of yoga studios, but there was like $15, $20 a drop in. And I said, well, I want a yoga studio where anyone can come and drop in and pay whatever they have, because not everyone can afford $20 for a class. So that was like sort of a unique niche that we filled because there was a need for it. So I think like when you're thinking about like what are the, even though there might be 5 herb stores in you or 5 herbalists in your town, like what is there not? Like what is something like, are there flower essences? Like maybe there's no flower essence shops, or yeah, if you have a background in tarot, like maybe you also offer tarot readings, and you combine tarot and herbs. So I think, yeah, thinking about like what are the areas of interest, and where are the gaps in the industries that you might be able to creatively fill.
You mentioned Present Moment and Jewel Weed, which are a couple of relatively local shops, Minneapolis and Wayzata, but very
Totally
different
different
shops.
vibes. Yeah.
And I remember where Jewel Weed started out. It's a very posh town, like the poshest town in the area, and very different demographic. But she started out in what would be a very, very, very small shop. And I can only imagine what the rent would still be in
Oh,
downtown
yeah.
Wayzata. But the point is, she started small, and from what I remember, she's a interior designer by trade, and just beautiful, beautiful shop, and obviously oriented towards a certain clientele, a higher end, higher price tag kind of clientele. And like you mentioned, there's all sorts of products, lots of stones, some books. But since it's a tiny shop, there are a lot of tiny items as well.
Yeah.
But she started out small. I don't remember how many years she was there at that. So tiny, let's to give you a perspective, it was probably the size of a luxury home's closet. So sizable for a closet, tiny for a shop, and put on workshops, or like little tarot readings and so forth. And just to say, you can have a specialty. I think specialty is even better.
Mhm.
And it sounded like when you started up your doing consulting as well as a consulting herbalist, you already had kind of a built-in clientele from your student days to the yoga studio. So I don't know if you would also have some tips as far as, or even in the yoga studio, one of the most common questions is, how do I get started? How do I find clients?
Yeah. So when I was the yoga studio manager at a wellness center in Silver Spring, and so they had massage, yoga, acupuncture, reflexology. So what was really nice is that so I got to know, I worked there, so I got to know the people, but there was also crossover with people that came through. So when I graduated from my herb school, I was the herbalist in that wellness center. So I think that's kind of an ideal setup. If you can find like a collective space, like a wellness center type place where they offer things like, yeah, massage, acupuncture, things like that, then an herbalist fits in really nicely. And I worked also in Georgetown in DC at for a naturopath. That was actually I worked at both places at the same time. They were like across town. And so, the naturopath knew specifically what, she knew a little bit about herbs, but didn't know enough to offer them or like recommend them. So she would send her clients to me. So I got clients from her. And then at the wellness center across town, I got a lot of massage people that were like, oh, I've got these joint pains. And then, my friend Glenda would be like, oh, well, Ashley, who's an herbalist, is here. And I know that there's herbs that can help with joint mobility and help with joint inflammation. You should do a consult with her. So there was a lot of cross referral that happens in those places. And that, I mean, I don't think I could have done it if I just rented a space and tried to put people in it. Like, I think it was that community oriented environment that really helped me to build my practice. And then, yeah, and then having like, I would teach a class for 20 people and I would mention something about herbs strategically, or I would bring in a tincture and I'd say, okay, I want everyone to take a few drops of lemon balm before Shavasana. Here's what it is. Here's why you might not take it. And then I would tell them a little bit about it. And then at the end, I'd say, if you want to learn more about herbs, I am seeing clients, and I'd have my business card.
That's
So I would
perfect.
like layer it into these, and then I would teach at like large events. Like I taught at a convention for Alcoholics Anonymous. I had 500 people in this huge stadium, and I talked about herbs. And I said, if you want to learn about herbs for recovery, come see me, and here's my business card. And I got clients from that. So you have to also not be afraid of like using the audiences you have to tell them what you're doing and like like promote yourself. Like it's not bad to say I do this thing and I can I like, because chances are you know more than they do. I remember one of my yoga teachers said that when I first started teaching. I was like, how am I going to teach yoga? Like, I don't know as much. I don't know that much. He's like, you know more than they do. I was like, oh, I do.
Mhm.
So if I can just teach what I know and trust that that's more than they would have gotten otherwise, like that's worth something. Like I can accept money for that. It's something I invested in. I paid for this education. Now it's time for me to receive as well as give the knowledge I have. So yeah, I think it's okay to promote, and it's always good to find large groups, get in front of a lot of people, because then that's gonna, out of all those people, you might get a few people that follow up and do individual work.
That's great. I'm always looking for these threads in these interviews. Like, what are some common threads? And one of the things that you said about, the being in a wellness oriented environment. Phyllis talked about that. Phyllis D. Light, who's one of our teachers, and she mentioned being in a similar type environment and how that really worked out well for her. And then another interview with Kira Sutherland, who's a naturopath, a traditional naturopath, said that so she's a runner. And so she would do workshops for runners and maybe even occasionally give away a couple of packages. She says, I don't give away too much, but strategically, just a few. And that so insightful, so helpful, because if you weren't raised in a family that is doing business, is doing something similar, at least it doesn't even occur to you. So I'm picking your guys' brains. So another thing I noticed among herbalists, people in this realm, is they're very giving, they're very generous. And you hinted upon it, like you invested your time, your money, and so forth into it. So it's time to give, but yes, get back and receive. So is that something that you obviously you had to go through because you're mentioning it, but to what degree, and what do you say to other people other than just what you just said, who are really like, but herbs come from the ground. How can I even charge for them? Or, this person is in such need. How would you coach? Because you've had many students come through. How would you coach them to, take care of their trunk, and balance that out?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like I think part of it is also knowing how much you need. Like how much money do you need? Because some people are very satisfied living on a very low income. Like they don't their needs are very low. And so then their pricing structure can be very different. And other people who might have kids or a higher mortgage or like, they might actually require more. So just to kind of be really realistic about that, about like, what are you going to need to generate per month if you want to do this. But then for me, I always like to have like, I always offer sliding scales in everything that I do. And I always have. And that's been a big part of, I think, what has made our both mine and my husband's businesses be very successful is that, here's like the set price. And then like this is like the standard tuition. And then we have need-based tuition options. And for our classes or for like my consults, I'd have a sliding scale and then I'd have student like and then senior pricing. So I think like being smart about like, okay, what are my needs and how do I reach my financial goals? But at the same time, like understanding that for me, I'd rather reach a lot of people. And like if I get like 100 people that pay $5, that's actually going to make more money than if I get 4 people that pay $20. So it's like, in some ways it's like figuring out like, how what structure is going to work. But also I think like if your spirit feels like it needs it, like a donation based scale is going to work better for you, then like that's okay too. And just but like I would never say one thing I did learn that didn't work was like pay what you can and then being like, oh, here's a penny for the yoga class. And I'm like, okay, now that doesn't feel like an equal exchange. So we ended up setting a minimum where like it was a minimum of a $5 donation.
Mhm.
That was after we were open for 5 years. We were like, okay, we need to set a minimum. And I think like setting boundaries, setting minimums is a good, healthy choice for everyone. Because yeah, you don't want to undervalue your work and then not get paid and then get burned out. But the thing I've also learned is that there are people with financial resources who will pay the top rate. So in my classes, for example, I end up having mostly need-based tuition students, but then I have enough standard payment and people who pay even above that because they can pay over. And it all balances out in the end. And
Mhm.
I get to meet that number.
Mhm.
um, you know, I don't know if that answered the question, Tara, but I think hopefully it gave some ideas of like at least the donation-based model as being one way to work around that.
That sounds very reasonable because when you come at it from like the standard, I'll just quote standard business background, it's just like you set prices, right? And that's it. And maybe you do sales. Um, but if you're coming at it from, the point of view that a lot of herbal oriented people are very empathic and even sympathetic, and so it that makes a lot of sense. I think that's the perfect answer for. It's a great answer for that. That for me even opens up my mind as well.
Mhm.
So yeah, lots to think about. So what's going on these days? What's on your
Yeah.
days?
I mean, these days, so I've started traveling and teaching again. So this summer, I taught a astrology and herb class in Toronto, which was really fun. My husband and I were asked to teach at a conference, and then I'm teaching at the Good Medicine Conference in July next month in Durango, Colorado. Um, so that's been fun to travel. We went to the Sphere in Vegas to see Dead and Company. Like I'm like a long time Grateful Dead head. So I've just been having lots of fun and like doing like work stuff and traveling for teaching, but then also yeah, just like doing things that are really fun, that really like feed me and feed the trunk, right? And I think fun has been a big part of that this year, has been like, like what really brings me joy, and let's do more of that. Also, gardening is a big part of my life right now. We have an acre of land here, and yeah, most of it is gardens. So I'm pretty busy tending the gardens, and that's just, I just, like if I get like 2 hours in the garden, like I am good. And then teaching my online classes and providing online content. So, I offer free content on YouTube once a week. And then I teach an online herbal apprenticeship, which is a year-long course that's self-paced. And then we have live interactive classes once a month where we go over the material and ask questions. And then we have a pretty active online community where people are posting and sharing. And so that's been really fun. It's been really fun to teach again. And I think this year too, I've just been meeting a lot of people. Like I know you and I haven't met in person yet. We almost did. It was like several times we got really close, and it will happen. But just being able to like meet other people from the herb community. And that's really, I think, high on my priority list this year too, is just, meeting more people.
Let me know if you're doing any herb walks. I know that we have plenty of students in this area who are looking for in-person herb walks. So definitely let me know about that too.
Okay. Yeah. Thank
I
you.
think you did earlier this year, didn't you?
What's that?
I think you did earlier this year, didn't you?
Yeah, I was teaching, I've been teaching at local preschools and elementary schools this year. So I've been doing lots of herb walks for like 3 to 8 year olds, which has been so fun. Like they're a hoot. But I did one family herb walk this year. But yeah, I'll reach out to you because I love doing that too. That's such a great way to just get outside and get to know the plants.
That age group is so much fun. I've had more so family friends kind of kids come over, and it's amazing. You say you're on 1 acre. It's amazing what can be on just a couple of acres. It's we have 2 3 acre lots. One's mostly field and one has lots of old trees. But there's so much. It's absolutely amazing when it hasn't been over cultivated. And so last year our goddaughters were over, and we did a little herb walk, but we were having a little picnic first, and they were excited they were done with the picnic, and so they were running. I'm like, okay, we're gonna I want to talk with your mom for a little bit. We'll get started in a little bit. And so they ran off and literally we have one patch of poison ivy, and it's not very big, but it's like they beelined right, bare feet and everything. And I'm like, wait, no, we're not yet. Like come back here. And it was so funny. It was like, it was almost like the plants were calling them over into the poison ivy, but they didn't get caught up in it. So that was good.
Yeah. Yeah, you do have to be careful because I did an herb walk for 8 year olds, and there was poison ivy. I said, see that plant, leaves of 3, let it be, see how it's shiny. I was like, do not touch it. You'll get a rash. It's terrible. It's a poisonous plant. This little kid, Max, goes right up to it and like touches it and looks at me. And I was like, shit. It's like, okay. So then the teacher had to take him up to the nurse to like wash up. And thankfully nothing happened. And I did find some yellow dock, which is like will help just like anything that has like saponins to help get the oils off, like really quickly. So I like did that like frantically because there was no jewel weed. I was like, well, let's just try to get this off. And thankfully he was fine. But I was like, yeah, there's something with that impulse control with that age. So I have to be very careful what I show. And like 3 and 4 year olds, I can't put anything in my mouth because if I put something in my mouth, they'll want to put everything in their mouth. So, so don't worry, I don't do, I'm not doing that, but it's like, it's been fun to just sort of see like a lot of them, they just love the shapes. Like motherwort is really dominant all over here. And so I teach them, it's like to call it chicken foot because it's like the leaves look like these like little chicken feet. And then we go on herb walks and we see how many chicken feet plants that they can find. And it's fun because they're just getting to know names. And I feel like if we know the names of plants, we're more likely to protect them. We're more likely to be respectful. So that's been just a really fun thing to see kids kind of light up when they start to like recognize and like know the names of things.
And they have such amazing memories. Like they'll just remember them. I love at the same time when the parents are with and you can see them absorbing at the same time.
Mhm.
And, like they have questions that like just opens up a world for them. I think it's so interesting in and of itself. Like there's just these multiple planes of awareness opening up, and the conversation that you can have afterwards.
Absolutely. Yeah, it is magical to see the generations of like the way, yeah, the way these like mycelial networks, like the way these new ideas start to go through people's minds. You can just literally see them changing their minds. You're like, this is
Mhm.
cool.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, it has been very delightful. I knew it was going to be, but it's been so delightful. I look forward to getting together in person sometime, and definitely let me know when you're hosting events that people can partake in.
Thank you. Thank you, Tara, for having me. And thank you for all the work you're doing with Matt and for keeping his school. I mean, like I know it's a lot just from like I can't even imagine doing what you do. So thank you for not only managing and keeping all of Matt's work up and available, but also for doing interviews like this and just really reaching out and connecting with the herbal community. It's very, very cool and very needed work. So thank you.
Oh, well, thank you. I appreciate that. It's I feel like I got some treats today too, as you're talking about the trunk. I believe I heard it in one of your podcasts as well. It's like that's a good reminder, and a good analogy. Sometimes when you have a visual, it can really help to solidify that as well. And so thank you very much. Yeah, I got some great insights, which is why I love doing these interviews as well. It's kind of my way of getting, I mean, I'm still behind the computer, but it's kind of my way of getting out into the herbal community as well, even
Mhm.
while being behind the computer still and getting to know people. So it's
Totally.
been a delight.
Yes. Thank you so much, Tara.
Thank you. Have a great day, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.